We're following today's breaking news, an attack at Ohio State University that left 11 people injured. Authorities say terrorism is a possible motive. We're also getting alarming new details about a huge number of newly revealed ISIS terror plots targeting the West. CNN's Brian Todd is joining us. Brian, how did these plots come to light?
Wolf, those plots were discovered when ISIS was pushed out of the Syrian city of Manbij, a key launching point for its operatives to conduct terror operations abroad. Tonight, coalition intelligence officials are working furiously, going through those captured ISIS files, because experts are warning that ISIS could be accelerating those terror plots now that they know their enemies are onto them. Chilling new information tonight from a top coalition commander who says several ISIS plots to attack the West have been discovered. British General Rupert Jones tells reporters the plans are in tens of thousands of ISIS documents and digital files captured after the terror group was driven out of the Syrian city of Manbij this summer. General Jones says, quote, a huge amount of intelligence gathered in Manbij related to threats in Europe and elsewhere. Tonight, reports say a special unit of the coalition is searching those captured phones, maps, laptops, and hard drives for more information about plots. Analysts say they need to move fast because ISIS will.
When they know that they have lost some of their human intelligence or their signals intelligence or their digital intelligence, anything that they have got in the pipeline in terms of terrorist attacks, they like to speed up.
What are intelligence officials looking for in the captured ISIS plans?
You can actually pinpoint the individuals who have gone to the battlefront and have gone back. And so intelligence services can actually see this information and then arrest the people before they can really do anything bad.
Intelligence officials had been crowing since Manbij was taken from ISIS, saying the city, close to Syria's border with Turkey, was crucial to ISIS's plots to launch operations outside Syria and Iraq.
It was a place where a lot of the foreign fighters were located and external operations, some of them were generated there.
General Jones's information on ISIS plots comes just days after 5 suspects were taken into custody in the French cities of Strasbourg and Marseille. Prosecutors say they'd been directed by ISIS operatives in the Middle East to attack France. A travel alert was then issued, warning Americans to be careful at holiday festivals in Europe.
As ISIS loses territory, it has to show that they are still an incredibly potent, successful organization. And one relatively easy and cheap way to do so is to commit terror attacks abroad.
And tonight, France and Belgium remain key targets for ISIS. Analysts say many top members of ISIS's foreign operations branch are either French or Belgian. Wolf.
Brian, there's also some very chilling detail emerging on an ISIS plot that was disrupted in France very recently. What have you learned?
Well, that's right, Wolf. The French prosecutor says on the night those operatives were arrested in Strasbourg and Marseille, at least 2 of those operatives had downloaded the app called Periscope, which enables you to live stream any event. The prosecutor says that led authorities to believe an attack was imminent and that the terrorists were going to live stream what they were going to do for the world to see.
Chilling indeed. All right, Brian, thank you. Brian Todd reporting.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following multiple breaking stories, including that brutal attack at Ohio State University. Sources now telling CNN that a Facebook page that apparently belonged to the attacker included grievances about attacks on Muslims. Tonight, we also know the attacker was an OSU student named Abdul Razik Ali Artan. A federal law enforcement official tells CNN he was 18 years old, of Somali descent, and a legal U.S. resident. Authorities say he rammed his car into a group of pedestrians standing on a sidewalk and then used a butcher knife to cut several people before he was killed by a police officer. Many students barricaded themselves in classrooms as the attack played out. 11 victims were hospitalized. Tonight, investigators are searching for a motive, including the possibility that this was a premeditated act of terrorism. Also breaking, President-elect Donald Trump says he was very impressed by retired General David Petraeus during their meeting over at Trump Tower just a little while ago. Petraeus is reportedly under consideration for the job as Secretary of State. We're told Trump is irritated that his campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, is warning of a backlash if he nominates Mitt Romney to that post. Also tonight, Donald Trump is officially declared the winner of Michigan as efforts intensify for a recount in that state, as well as in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Trump is rejecting the recount campaign as a scam, even as he now is making a stunning allegation of voter fraud without any evidence to back it up. Trump tweeting that he actually would have won the popular vote if millions of ballots hadn't been cast illegally in the most recent presidential contest. We'll talk about the breaking news with two U.S. senators on key committees, Republican James Lankford and Democrat Chris Coons. Our correspondents, analysts, and guests, they are also standing by. We'll bring you full coverage of the day's top stories. Up first, let's go to CNN's Bryn Gingras. She's got more on the attack at Ohio State University. What are you learning, Bryn?
Well, Wolf, right now investigators are just going through all of that evidence, among them what you just mentioned, that Facebook post. According to federal law enforcement officials, that Artan expressed some grievances about recent attacks on Muslims. We also know from cameras that are all around this campus that he arrived here in a car alone. We actually saw that car being towed away with a police escort just a short time ago. We also know from officials that they are questioning people that may have known him or had any sort of acquaintance with him. We know that his mother actually spoke to a community member and said that he was recently complaining about school and about his grades. We also know that community members said that he was a good kid. All of this, though, a part of the investigation to determine exactly why he may have done this and if terrorism was a reason.
Tonight, university police naming the suspected attacker as OSU student Abdul Razak Ali Artan. A federal law enforcement official tells CNN he was an 18-year-old Somali citizen who lived in the area. A U.S. official says he was a legal permanent resident. Investigators are still working on determining motive and can't rule out terror at this point.
We have to consider that it is that possibility. We had an attack earlier this year with a man with a knife causing multiple injuries. So we're always aware that that's the potential, and we're going to continue to look at that. That's why our federal partners are here and helping.
Police say the attacker deliberately jumped the curb with a car and rammed into a group of pedestrians. A federal official tells CNN the car used in the attack was registered to a family member.
Around 9:52 a.m., the emergency dispatch center got a report that a vehicle had struck pedestrians.
He then continued to attack, slashing people with a knife.
He exited the vehicle and used a butcher knife to start cutting pedestrians.
Less than a minute later, the attacker was confronted by a police officer.
He engaged the suspect and he eliminated the threat. The suspect is DOA.
Within minutes of the attack, a campus-wide alert went out reporting an active shooter on campus, run, hide, fight. A federal law enforcement official tells CNN the gunshots reported may have been of the police officer shooting the attacker. On campus, students and faculty blocked doorways and hid while waiting for the all clear.
Our teacher ran in and locked the door, and at the same time we all saw we heard a bunch of sirens and a bunch of cop cars all just started flooding towards that area.
It's scary. It was really scary. We barricaded ourselves in our rooms like we were taught, turned off our lights, and just hunkered down.
At least 10 people were injured in the attack. None of the injuries are believed to be life-threatening.
And non-life-threatening injuries, Wolf, a majority of that credit due to a campus police officer, 28-year-old Alan Haruchka, who actually used to be a student here at OSU. Authorities say he was just in the right place at the right time, but he also acted quickly, taking action just under 1 minute, likely saving lives there. Also want to mention, Wolf, that authorities right now conducting a search warrant of the suspect's home. Back to you.
All right, Bryn Gingras on the campus of Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. We're just getting in the first photo now that we have received of the assailant in this particular case. There you see him, Abdul Razak Ali Artan. This picture coming from the Lantern, the Ohio State University student newspaper. There you see him right there, Abdul Razak Ali Artan, 18 years old. He used a vehicle to plow into a crowd. Previous article, by the way, in the student newspaper, not a current article or anything along those lines, but he then used the knife to go after students and others on the campus of Ohio State University. Let's talk about the breaking news with Republican Senator James Lankford. He's a top member of the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees. Senator, thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be with you.
So I know you've been briefed on what's going on. You're a member of these key committees. Do you think this was a deliberate act of terror?
Yeah, it's unknown still at this time. I would say that the initial thing for me is we have to learn a lot more. But typically, if it's an ISIS terrorist in particular, right before they carry out the attack, the last post that they put on their Facebook page is a pledge of allegiance to ISIS, is the ISIS flag, and they carry out the attack. That we find now, or we're hearing that on the Facebook page there are some comments about it, doesn't tend to lend towards the typical mode for ISIS. So we'll see in the days ahead. But
yeah, the Facebook page, believed to be that of the assailant in this case, included grievances about attacks on Muslims around the world. That was apparently the headline coming out of the Facebook post.
That makes a big difference if it's the last post or if it's some post that's buried down in it. We'll have to see what that is.
Apparently this was the last post.
If it's the last post, that's pretty telling.
Pretty telling of what?
Pretty telling of a terrorist act. Because that's been the mode. If you go back to San Bernardino and the attacks there, if you go back to Orlando and the attacks there, multiple other locations, the last thing they'll post is a pledge of allegiance to ISIS or to some connection with international terrorist groups that we know of, or to some complaint about what's happening, and then they'll carry out their act of terrorism. So there is no advance warning for most lone wolf attacks. They live among us, they're operating, they're planning, and then they'll post and then carry out their attack.
They could be inspired by what they've seen on social media, or they could be instructed by someone, presumably the FBI, local law enforcement. They're going through all this guy's records to see if there was any linkage, direct linkage to ISIS, AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or some other terror group.
That's correct. Yeah, there's a big difference between inspired and directed. They both end up the same damaged individuals that are here. But if you have individuals that are in Syria or in the Arabian Peninsula directly communicating, whether that be through a means that's encrypted or through an open series to be able to instruct them, or someone that's just inspired, says, I've watched YouTube videos of certain different clerics and I'm inspired to be able to carry out attacks. Both of them still have the same result, but you find a very different connection point, I guess, to that.
You know, it's going to cause a lot of concern out there. And I'll give you the tweet that the National Security Advisor designate for the President-elect, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He tweeted this earlier this year: "Fear of Muslims is rational," rational all caps. "Please forward this to others. The truth fears no questions." Is that kind of rhetoric appropriate?
Well, that kind of rhetoric is difficult because you've got Muslim neighbors, you've got individuals that you're around that go to school with you. It's not that you're afraid of all Muslims, it's just the reality that there are some individuals, as we have seen in these other lone wolf attacks, that do live in neighborhoods and then that suddenly go active in whatever means that may be at that point. So there's a rational sense of it, but it's irrational just to be afraid of every person that you're around just based on their faith.
He was interviewed by the school newspaper, and we showed the picture of this individual, Abdul Razak Ali Artan, the 18-year-old Somali permanent resident of the United States. There you see it. He says in this article that appeared not that long ago, "I just transferred from Columbus State, a community college. We had prayer rooms, like actual rooms, where we could go to pray because we Muslims have to pray 5 times a day." Then he goes on and says this. He says, "I wanted to pray in the open, but I was kind of scared with everything going on in the media. I'm a Muslim. It's not what the media portrays me to be. If people look at me, a Muslim praying, I don't know what they're going to think, what's going to happen, but I don't blame them." That's what he said earlier in this article in August, not that long ago, in the student newspaper at Ohio State University. So clearly he was very sensitive to being a Muslim and going out and praying in the open.
Right, and that you're still in the same situation there. He's sensitive, saying, don't judge me that I'm a terrorist because I want to pray in the open or because I'm a Muslim, and then months later he gets a knife in a car and he attacks people. We'll have to find out a lot of motive there, but that's very chilling to be able to see the side-by-side.
But are you concerned that some of the rhetoric that has come out during this political season has been so disturbing that an individual like this, who says, I'm afraid to pray in public because he's a Muslim, could obviously, as we saw him today, go off the deep end, if you will, take a vehicle, a regular vehicle, plow into a sidewalk where there's a bunch of people standing by and start wanting to kill them, and then stop the vehicle, jump out with a butcher's knife, as it's been described. Some have said it's a machete, and just starting to slash individuals.
Yeah, nothing clearly in any of our political rhetoric would ever justify something like this.
Nothing ever justified.
Or would ever inspire it in that sense. If you have individuals in whatever political conversation it may be to say this agreement, disagreement, like, don't like, That doesn't engage people to say suddenly you don't like me, and so I'm going to suddenly go kill people because you don't like me. That reinforces the stereotype that they say is everyone should be opposed to. So at the end of the day, we'll have to find out a lot more about why he would carry this out, but I don't see anything in our political campaign that should cause Muslims to suddenly go kill people.
During the campaign, Donald Trump said it would be appropriate to survey mosques. Is that appropriate?
It would be only if you've got a cleric that's in a situation that's trying to actively inspire people to engage in some sort of hate or some sort of attack or some sort of violence. If you've got someone that is actively trying to engage and say you should go carry these things out, that would be entirely appropriate, because you've got to figure out why are people drawn to this particular leader and what are they trying to inspire. But to just go participate in every mosque and to be able to do surveillance on them, no, that's not appropriate.
Because as you know,
typical.
ISIS, AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, other terror groups, they've said, if you don't have a gun, get a knife. If you don't have a knife, just take a vehicle and start killing infidels, if you will. That's what you got to do. They've made this suggestion in social media. You've seen that.
Absolutely, I have. And that is the most difficult about dealing with a lone wolf attack or dealing with either inspiration or direction from overseas. We can go all the way back to a conversation you and I had 2 years ago about individuals from Syria contacting someone in Phoenix and saying, there's an event in Garland, Texas. They hate Muslims. You should go kill them. They left out. No one had any idea, any perspective for them, drove from Arizona to Garland, Texas, took out guns there, and if it wasn't for Texas law enforcement meeting them there, we would all be talking about a bloodbath that would have happened in Garland, Texas. That was an individual living in the community that was directed by someone overseas that went and carried that out. That is the most difficult part about it.
And once again, we don't know if this individual may have been inspired,
we don't know,
or may have been directed, or may have simply been mentally ill, if you will.
That's correct.
Went ahead and did what he did, but we're going to get more information very soon. By the way, I want to thank you for this report, and you have a copy of the report you just put out. A federal fumbles billions and billions of dollars in wasted money that the federal government engages in, and people can go read that, right?
They can. They can go to my website, just langford.senate.gov, and be able to identify it. Every year we put out a list of 100. It's not exhaustive of all the areas of federal waste. But we try to examine multiple different agencies, and we don't just examine waste, and we don't just examine regulations, but we try to look at where's the source of this and how do you fix it. With my team, we always talk about it. At home, when we're at breakfast with people, we can sit and complain about waste. With our job and our task, we have to find ways to fix it. So in every one of those areas, we identify here's the waste, or here's the problem with regulation, here's how to actually fix it, and then we try to work towards that. From last year's guide, we come back and look at it for this year and say, here are the areas that we fixed over the last year, because there's a great deal that has to be done still.
Thanks for doing this, because I keep hearing for years and years, waste, fraud, and abuse. Rarely does much happen about it, but hopefully something will happen about it.
We can fix it. We take it on one at a time.
Senator Langford, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Coming up, I'll speak with Democratic Senator Chris Coons. He's got thoughts on what's going on. Also, we'll have more on the breaking news, including new information about that young attacker, 18-year-old, killed by police at Ohio State University. Plus, the Trump team fighting over who should become the next Secretary of State. Does the president-elect have a new favorite tonight?